Hey Reddit, I've been a longtime lurker on various subs, finding comfort, advice, and sometimes just a necessary laugh in the stories shared here. For years, I've carried my own story, a heavy, jagged thing, close to my chest. But today, I feel ready to lay it out. Not for pity, because I'm past that. Not for applause, because the journey was its own reward. I'm writing this for the person out there who might be standing where I once stood, staring into an abyss so black it seems to swallow light, feeling like everything has been stolen from them. If that's you, I want you to hear this. They can take a lot, but they can't take your future unless you let them. This is going to be long, probably an overshare, but every word is true to my experience. It started as these insidious things often do, not with a bang, but with a perfectly calibrated smile. His name was Lucas Thorne. Even his name sounded like something out of a glossy magazine, didn't it? We met at a local tech entrepreneur's mixer. I was there, a bundle of nerves and ambition, representing Pixel Bloom, the small graphic design agency I'd poured my heart, soul, and every last penny of my meager savings into. Pixel Bloom was my first baby. I'd started it in my tiny studio apartment with a secondhand iMac, fueled by instant ramen and an unshakable belief that good design could make a difference. We were just starting to get noticed, landing a few decent local clients. I remember one of our first big wins, redesigning the branding for The Cozy Corner, a beloved local bookstore. The owner, Mrs. Gable, a woman with flour permanently dusted on her apron and eyes that crinkled with kindness, had hugged me and said my designs had given her shop a new lease on life. That feeling was what I lived for. Lucas, on the other hand, was smooth, impeccably dressed, and radiated an almost unnerving level of self-assurance. He introduced himself as a venture consultant, a growth catalyst for promising startups. He said he had an eye for untapped potential. And that night, his eye, unsettlingly intense, was on me. Alex Hayes, right? Pixel Bloom? He'd said, extending a hand. I've heard good things. You're making waves. His flattery was like a drug I hadn't realized I was craving. The courtship, because that's what it was, a meticulous, calculated courtship of my ambition, was a masterclass in manipulation. He'd casually show up at the coffee shop he knew I frequented, always ready with an encouraging word or a piece of seemingly invaluable advice. He'd dissect my business plan, which, in retrospect, was hopelessly naive, with a surgeon's precision, pointing out flaws I hadn't seen, then offering brilliant solutions. He spoke the language of scaling, of seed rounds, of market disruption, a language I was desperate to learn. He made me feel like I was on the cusp of something monumental. Pixel Bloom at the time consisted of myself, Olivia, a coding prodigy who could make websites sing, and Ben, a whimsical illustrator whose characters seemed to leap off the page. We were a tight-knit trio, often working late into the night, sharing lukewarm pizza and big dreams. Lucas saw this, but he also saw, I think, the cracks in my confidence, my yearning for a mentor, for someone to take the terrifying business uncertainties off my shoulders. The proposal came during a dinner at a restaurant I couldn't have afforded on my own in a year. Alex, he began, his voice a low, conspiratorial hum. Pixel Bloom is a gem, but it's a rough diamond. It needs polishing, the right setting. I can provide that. Let me invest. Let me handle the administrative headaches, the fundraising, the expansion strategy. You just focus on what you do best, creating beautiful, impactful designs. He painted a picture of Pixel Bloom Global, of international awards, of me as a celebrated creative director, unburdened and triumphant. My lawyer, the ever-cautious Mr. Henderson, a man whose office smelled of old books and integrity, threw up more red flags than a bullfighting convention. He pored over Lucas's proposed partnership agreement for days. Alex, this contract is heavily skewed in Mr. Thorne's favor, he'd said, tapping a thick finger on a clause. He gets significant equity for his capital, yes, but also sweeping control over financial decisions, over directorship appointments. It's aggressive. Men who want this much control aren't usually silent partners. I remember feeling a surge of irritation. Mr. Henderson was old-fashioned. He didn't understand the speed of the tech world, the boldness required. Lucas had an answer for everything, of course. The clauses were standard practice for venture capital. He needed agility to make quick decisions in a fast-moving market. And besides, weren't we a team? Didn't I trust him? By then, our professional relationship had also, almost imperceptibly, slid into a personal one. Late-night strategy sessions had turned into dinners, then something more. He was brilliant, attentive, and he made me feel like the most talented woman in the world. That potent cocktail of professional ambition and personal affection was my undoing. I signed. I signed away my baby thinking I was setting it free to fly. The first 18 months were like a rocket launch. Lucas was true to his word, at least about the capital. A significant sum appeared in Pixel Bloom's new, Lucas-managed bank account. We moved from our cramped, beloved shoebox office to a sleek, glass-walled space downtown that made me feel like an imposter every time I walked in. We hired a dozen new people, designers, developers, account managers. Lucas, it turned out, was a networking god. He brought in clients I'd only dreamed of, a boutique hotel chain, a trendy, sustainable fashion label, even a preliminary discussion with a national beverage company. I was working 80-hour weeks, drowning in projects, but it was exhilarating. Pixel Bloom was featured in design magazines. I was invited to speak at conferences. Alex Hayes, the Midas touch of millennial design, one headline gushed. Lucas was always there, a supportive presence in the background, my rock, my brilliant strategist. The warning signs were there, of course, like faint, discordant notes in an otherwise swelling symphony. He began to subtly isolate me. Olivia and Ben, my original partners in crime, found themselves increasingly sidelined. Lucas implemented new, streamlined communication protocols, where all major project decisions and client interactions had to go through him. "You're the creative visionary, Alex," he'd say, his hand resting a little too long on my shoulder. "Let me filter out the noise so you can focus." Financial updates became glossy, summarized presentations delivered by Lucas, full of impressive graphs but light on actual granular detail. When I asked for deeper access to the raw accounting, he'd chuckle. "Babe, you handle the pixels, I'll handle the P&L. That's our deal, remember?" His charm was a silken cage, and I was too busy admiring its sheen to realize the door had been locked. He'd also mastered a particular kind of psychological manipulation. In front of the new team, he'd sometimes question my creative choices, just enough to plant a seed of doubt. Then, in private, he'd lavish me with praise, telling me I was the only one who truly understood the vision. It kept me perpetually off balance, increasingly dependent on his validation. The first real crack in the facade appeared when Olivia confronted me. She'd always been the quiet, observant one. After a particularly brutal meeting where Lucas had systematically dismantled one of her innovative technical proposals in front of the entire team, then presented a watered-down version as his own idea. A week later, she cornered me in the hallway. Her face was pale, her usual bright eyes dull with disillusionment. "Alex, this isn't us anymore," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "This isn't Pixel Bloom. It's the Lucas Thorne show, and I don't like the script. The numbers he presents in meetings, they don't always add up with the project scopes, and he's making promises to clients, financial commitments that we're not always privy to. I'm scared for you." For the company, I wish I could say I listened, truly listened. But I was defensive. I was in too deep, both professionally and personally. I relayed Olivia's concerns to Lucas, expecting him to be alarmed, to want to fix it. Instead, he launched into a tirade about her lack of ambition, her resistance to change, her obvious jealousy of our success and our relationship. He was so utterly convincing, so masterfully indignant, that I found myself doubting Olivia, my friend, my first collaborator. Olivia resigned a week later, citing a desire to pursue other opportunities. Her leaving felt like a physical blow, a tear in the fabric of what Pixel Bloom once was. Ben, quieter and less confrontational, followed her out the door 3 months later, his resignation email a masterpiece of polite evasion that nevertheless screamed of his unhappiness. I was now the creative figurehead of a company staffed by people Lucas had hired, people loyal to him. I was more isolated than I'd ever been, even as Pixel Bloom's star seemed to ascend ever higher. The implosion began on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday morning. I'd just come from a triumphant client presentation for a campaign I was incredibly proud of. I was practically floating. Then my phone rang. It was John, our usually jovial print supplier. His voice was tight, angry. "Alex, I'm sorry, but we can't extend any more credit. You're past due by 90 days on invoices totaling nearly $50,000. We need payment by end of day, or we're stopping all current jobs and initiating collection." 50,000? Impossible. We were flush, weren't we? I tried Lucas's cell. Voicemail. His office line. Voicemail. I walked over to his office, a corner suite with a panoramic city view. It was empty. Not just empty of him, but his personal photos, his awards, even the ridiculously expensive art piece he'd insisted on buying for the wall. All gone. His assistant, Chloe, a young woman who always looked like a startled deer, was white as a sheet. "Mr. Thorne. He sent a company-wide email last night, Alex," she stammered, her eyes wide with fear. "Effective immediately, he's resigned. He said he was pursuing an opportunity overseas. He cleared his desk after everyone left." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. An opportunity overseas? Without a word to me? My hands were shaking as I tried to log in to Pixel Bloom's main business banking portal. Access denied. My corporate Amex, the one with the unlimited prestige, was declined when I frantically tried to buy a coffee to steady my nerves. I raced to the bank, the one Ms. Albright, the Stern branch manager, presided over. Her expression, when she finally agreed to see me, was a mixture of professional froideur and something that looked disturbingly like pity. "Ms. Hayes," she said, her voice devoid of warmth, "Mr. Thorne invoked a clause in your company's operating agreement and banking resolutions. 3 months ago, he was granted sole signatory authority and the power to restructure directorship. As of that date, you were removed as an authorized party on all Pixel Bloom accounts. There are considerable overdrafts and several large recent international wire transfers. The accounts are, for all intents and purposes, empty. In fact, they carry substantial debt." 3 months. For 3 months, while he was smiling in my face, telling me he loved me, praising my work, he was systematically bleeding my company dry. He'd taken out massive loans against Pixel Bloom's inflated Lucas-reported assets. He'd maxed out lines of credit I never even knew we had. He'd juggled payments, created a Potemkin village of financial health, all while tunneling out the foundations. The days that followed were a living nightmare. The sleek office was locked by the landlord. Angry creditors, suppliers, freelancers, people whose livelihoods depended on us, were calling, emailing, some even showing up at my apartment building. The media, once so eager to sing my praises, now feasted on the scandal. Pixel Bloom implodes amidst fraud allegations. Design Darling's dream turns to dust. The implication in some articles was that I was either a fool or a co-conspirator. He hadn't just stolen money. He'd stolen my reputation, my credibility, my professional identity. He'd taken Pixel Bloom, my beautiful, vibrant creation, and turned it into a toxic wasteland of debt and broken promises. And he, Lucas Thorne, the architect of this devastation, was gone. Vanished like a puff of smoke, leaving me to face the inferno. I lost my apartment. The lease had personal guarantees Lucas had cleverly woven in. I was officially bankrupt, both the company and myself personally. The debt figures were astronomical, enough to make me physically ill every time I looked at the statements. I ended up on my friend Maya's couch, surrounded by a few pathetic boxes containing the remnants of my life. Maya, bless her pragmatic heart, never said "I told you so," but her worried glances spoke volumes. There was one night, about a week into this new, horrifying reality. I was lying on that lumpy couch, staring at the water stains on Maya's ceiling. The weight of the debt, the shame, the betrayal, it was a physical pressure on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The thought of just not existing anymore. It wasn't an abstract concept. It was a quiet, insistent whisper in the dead of night. He'd won. He'd taken it all. What was the point of even trying to fight back against something so monumental? That was the bottom, Reddit. The absolute, lightless, airless bottom of the abyss. The turning point wasn't a lightning bolt from a clear sky. It was a slow, smoldering ember of rage that finally caught fire. I'd taken a mind-numbing temp job inputting data for an insurance company. The pay was barely enough to cover my bus pass and contribute a pittance to Maya for groceries. I was sitting there, my eyes burning, my wrists aching, listening to two women next to me cheerfully planning a weekend spa trip, and something inside me just snapped. It wasn't despair anymore. It was pure, undiluted fury. He did this. He lied. He stole. And he thought he could just walk away and leave me destroyed? He thought he'd taken everything? Number. He took things. He took money. He took a company I'd loved. But he didn't take my brain. He didn't take my skills, battered as they were. He couldn't have my future. That, I swore to myself with a vehemence that actually made me sit up straighter, was mine. That night, I didn't just collapse in front of Maya's TV. I found an old, dog-eared notebook and a pen. On the first page, I wrote in big, angry letters, Operation Phoenix. It sounds dramatic, I know, but I needed a banner to rally under, even if I was an army of one. First, the brutal truth. I listed every single debt, every creditor, every looming payment. The list stretched for pages. It was terrifying. But seeing it all there, in black and white, it transformed from a nebulous monster under the bed into a concrete enemy I could strategize against. Next, assets. Not financial, obviously. I listed skills. Graphic design, expert. Project management, battle-tested. Client communication, needs trust rebuilding, but core skill intact. Resilience, apparently off the charts. Fast learner, problem solver. I even wrote down, can make a surprisingly edible meal out of instant noodles and a ketchup packet. Gallows humor, my new best friend. The climb out was the hardest thing I've ever done. It wasn't a graceful ascent. It was a bloody, fingernail-scraping scrabble up a cliff face in a hurricane. I started by calling every creditor. My voice shook for the first few calls. I expected to be screamed at, threatened. Some were harsh, yes. But to my utter astonishment, when I laid out the situation, the fraud, the bankruptcy, my personal commitment to pay something, however small, on a regular basis, many were willing to negotiate payment plans, teeny, tiny payment plans, $5 a week to one, 10 to another. But it was a start. It was a promise. I quit the soul-sucking data entry job. I knew I had to leverage my actual skills if I was ever going to make a dent in this. Swallowing my pride, which was already 6 feet under, I started reaching out. Not to the big clients Lucas had landed. The thought of facing them was too humiliating. But to the smaller businesses I'd worked with in Pixel Bloom's early innocent days. Mrs. Gable from the Cozy Corner was one of the first people I called. "Alex, dear," she'd exclaimed, her voice as warm as her freshly baked bread. "I heard there was some trouble. Are you all right?" I explained, haltingly, that I was freelancing again, starting from scratch. I could help her with a new flyer, maybe update her website a bit, for a very modest fee. "Of course, dear," she said, without a moment's hesitation. "Your work was always lovely." That first freelance check, for $75, felt more valuable than any of the inflated sums that had passed through Pixel Bloom's accounts under Lucas. I cried when I deposited it. I became a library nomad, using their free Wi-Fi and computers from the moment they opened until they regretfully shooed me out at closing. My diet consisted primarily of value-pack pasta and hope. Every dollar I earned was meticulously budgeted, a tiny fraction for survival, the rest divvied up amongst the payment plans. Some days the rejections were overwhelming. A curt email, a non-returned call, each one felt like a fresh slap. The shadow of Lucas loomed large. I'd see a man on the street with similar hair or build, and my stomach would clench, my breath catching in my throat. The nightmares were frequent and vivid. One of the most difficult steps was going back to see Mr. Henderson. I didn't have money for legal advice. I went to apologize, for my arrogance, for my naivety, for not heeding his wise counsel. He listened patiently, his office still smelling of old books and quiet dignity. When I finished, my voice hoarse, he simply nodded. "The mills of God grind slowly, Alex, but they grind exceedingly fine," he said, a phrase I didn't quite understand then. "You were foolish, but foolishness is curable. Malice, like Mr. Thorne's, often isn't." He then did something that floored me. He offered to help, pro bono, to sort through the tangled legal wreckage of my personal liability from Pixel Bloom's collapse, untangling me from some of the corporate debts Lucas had fraudulently secured against my name. "Consider it an investment in seeing integrity prevail," he'd said with a rare, small smile. He also gave me a pamphlet for a local nonprofit that mentored entrepreneurs who'd faced significant setbacks. "They understand second chances there," he told me. That incubator program was a godsend. It provided workshops on lean startup methodologies, financial literacy for the traumatized, not its official name, but it should be, and most importantly, a community of people who got it. They didn't see me as a failure, they saw me as a survivor. It was there, surrounded by other scrappy dreamers, that the idea for second story design began to take shape. I wouldn't try to recreate Pixel Bloom. That chapter was closed. Second Story would be different, smaller, deeply ethical, transparent, and dedicated to helping other small businesses and nonprofits build their dreams without breaking the bank or their trust. The name was symbolic, a new narrative built on the foundations of a past I was determined to overcome. About a year into this grueling rebuild, when I was finally renting a tiny room in a shared house, and Second Story was just me and a flickering laptop, I got a call, an unknown number. "Alex? Is that you? It's Olivia." My heart leaped. Olivia, my brilliant coder, my friend. We'd lost touch, mostly because I'd been too ashamed to reach out. I I heard you were doing your own thing again," she said, her voice hesitant. "I'm miserable in my corporate cog-in-a-wheel job. They value spreadsheets more than innovation. I miss building things that matter. I miss working with you when it was good. If you're looking for a coder, even part-time, I'm available." We met for coffee. There were tears, apologies, mostly from me, and then an idea, a partnership, a real one this time, built on mutual respect and hard-won wisdom. A few weeks later, Ben, our illustrator, got wind of our reunion. He was freelancing, drawing soulless advertising characters. "Heard the band might be getting back together?" he emailed. "My pencils are sharpened if you need them." And just like that, the heart of the old Pixel Bloom, the true, honest heart, was beating again. Not in a fancy office, but crammed around my small kitchen table, fueled by determination and an endless supply of cheap tea. We were Second Story Design. We were scrappy, we were hungry, and we were united by a shared history and a fierce desire to build something good, something real. The journey to financial stability was a marathon, not a sprint. There were no shortcuts, no sudden windfalls, just relentless hard work, meticulous budgeting. I became a spreadsheet queen, and saying no more often than yes. No to exploitative clients, no to unsustainable growth, no to anything that smelled remotely like Lucas's modus operandi. We focused on delivering exceptional quality and even more exceptional customer service. Our clients were other small businesses, local artisans, community projects. We understood their struggles because we were living them. Word of mouth became our most powerful marketing tool. One of the most profound surprise moments came not from a huge contract, but from an email. It was from one of the smaller creditors Lucas had stiffed, a family-run print shop that had been hit hard. I'd been paying them $20 a month every month for nearly 3 years. The email simply said, "Dear Alex, we've been following your new company's progress. We see what you're building. We consider your debt to us paid in full. Keep doing good work." I sat at my desk and wept, not from sadness, but from a profound sense of gratitude. It was a reminder that integrity, however slowly, gets noticed. What about Lucas, you ask? For a long time, the desire for him to face justice was a burning coal in my gut. I'd filed every possible report, cooperated with every investigation. Rumors surfaced that he'd fled to some non-extradition country in Southeast Asia, living off his ill-gotten gains. The police investigation eventually went cold, citing jurisdictional challenges and lack of resources. There were days when that news felt like another punch. But a funny thing happened as Second Story grew, as my life started to feel like my own again. The space he occupied in my head began to shrink. My energy became focused on creation, not retribution. He was a chapter, a horrific, scarring chapter, but not the whole book. My story was still being written. Today, Second Story Design is a small but mighty team of 12. We have a bright, airy office with a very good coffee machine, and everyone has the key to the supply cupboard. We're profitable. We choose clients whose values align with ours. I'm not driving a Porsche or living in a mansion, but I am completely debt-free. I own a modest condo. I have an emergency fund that could withstand a zombie apocalypse, almost. More importantly, I have peace. I have a team I trust implicitly. I do work that I believe in. I sleep soundly at night. The ultimate surprise, Reddit, wasn't catching Lucas or becoming fabulously wealthy. It was discovering the woman I became in the crucible of that betrayal. He took money, he took a company, he took my sense of safety for a long, dark time. He took years I'll never get back, years spent clawing my way out of the pit he dug. But he couldn't take my spirit. He couldn't crush my will to rebuild. He thought he was writing my ending, but he only wrote the prologue to my real story. He forged me, and I came out not broken, but tempered. So if you're out there feeling like the world has caved in, like someone has stolen your light, breathe. Just breathe. Then pick up one tiny piece, then another. Your future is not a thing to be taken, it's a thing to be made by you, one true, honest step at a time. Thanks for letting me share. It's been a journey.